Hey everybody, I'm Mark Walters, and I'm standing here with Bjorn Lomborg, who is the subject of the new movie Cool It, which I just got a chance to see. And I got to tell you, man, it's interesting because I know you guys are sort of marketing this as you know, the inconvenient truth kind of brought the problem to light, and you guys are talking about how to solve the problem. I think that's a perfect way to put it, because you really are bringing up a lot of interesting solutions to what is a definite problem, you know, that we're facing right now, but also at the same time showing us how much of it is scare tactic and how much of it is fact. I guess talk a little bit about how did this whole project come about? Was this, I mean, obviously you're someone that's very passionate about what you talk about. When did Cool It kind of start to come to fruition and come together?
Well, I mean, in many senses, this is a work of love over many, many years. I wrote a book some years ago, 3 years ago, called Cool It, about how we should think about this in a smarter and better way. You know, you write a book, a couple 100,000 people, if you're lucky, will read it. But if you really want to get out, if you want to change the way we think about global warming, you got to do as Al Gore. And so I think, you know, thanks to Al Gore for having put it on the agenda, but what this film is trying to do is partly pull back of the scare tactics. I understand why a lot of people have been focusing on the scare tactics, because if you want to get people's attention, you scare the pants off of them. But it's unhelpful in the long run because we make bad decisions. You know, if you're panicked, you're unlikely to make smart choices. But also, you can't keep people scared for 100 years. You can keep them scared for 5 or 10 years, but then eventually they, you know, turn off. You know, Al Gore shows how Florida is going to disappear under the waves. But you know, people go down to Florida and they say it's still there. Maybe he wasn't right, and that's not the correct way to conclude. But I see how that happens. The second part, as you also mentioned, was then let's talk about the solutions. Let's get people engaged in saying, yeah, this is a problem, but now how do we solve it? Because the fundamental fact of the last 18 years of global warming policies is we haven't done a thing. Yeah. We've basically been promising all kinds of stuff but haven't done anything. And there's a very simple reason. Because we've been promising stuff that's going to be very costly and will do very little good 100 years from now. That's hard to sell. And that's why we talk about, and that's what I really think is exciting in this movie, we're talking about all the other ways you could tackle global warming.
There's an expression that's used sometimes, especially with politicians, and that is talking loud, saying nothing. And I think that sometimes that applies to what you're saying. I mean, obviously, it's like we know there's a problem, we know that we are in trouble, but actually getting these solutions to take place. And one of the things that's very interesting about the film is that you present a lot of solutions that I never even thought about. The thing that really fascinated me was when the one, and I forget his name, but the man who was talking about how if we painted everything white,
yes,
that would reflect the light back and automatically cool the earth. And of course, my thought process, as I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are thinking, is, well, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Why isn't that a law? Why don't they just tell us, hey, you know what, you got to paint your roof white?
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a simple solution. You have to remember this can't solve the whole problem, but it could definitely solve the fact that most people are going to be living in cities by the end of the century, probably 80 and 90%. And those people are going to experience much more warming simply because cities are much warmer than the surrounding countrysides. Why don't we make cities cooler? That's one of the proposals that we have. And again, you have to remember there's not one single solution that's going to fix everything, but it's certainly a great start. It's a great part of the solution. So let's do that.
Yeah.
And likewise, I think you talk about why are they talking loud but saying very little. I think fundamentally it's because we allow them. Because we like politicians who go out and say very grandly, we're going to save the world in 20 years after I've stopped being a politician, which is very, very convenient. Remember, you know, Schwarzenegger in 2005 promising that he was going to take California to Kyoto in 2020, which was 10 years after he stopped being governor. Very easy promise to make. Everybody loved him for it. Now, of course, they're talking about something entirely different in California. So it's just simply we allow them to get away with stuff that we kind of ought to know is never going to happen. That's why I'm saying instead of making these promises that are both not going to happen, but even if they were, would do very little good 100 years from now at a very high price, why don't we start talking about smarter things? And the ultimate smart thing that we're talking about in the film is let's invest a lot more in research and development of green energy. Because, you know, fundamentally, as long as solar panels cost a fortune, you're going to have a few rich, well-meaning Westerners put up a few of them. But if they were cheap,
yeah,
everyone would put them up.
Yeah, of course, then the energy companies would have something to say about that too, and it's all kind of this cyclical thing of, I'm sure that plays at least some factor into it. So,
well, listen, the energy companies would love to sell us the solar panels. They're probably only going to last 10 to 20 years. That's certainly how they do right now. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I can't see why they wouldn't want to sell us that instead, or possibly just sell us the energy from the big solar panel arrays that they would be putting up in the Sahara or in the Mexican desert or wherever. So the fundamental point is, it's not that the energy companies want to hold back, because remember, they typically don't own the oil or the coal, they just simply dig for it. And so Saudi Arabia don't want us to switch away. But I think I can live with that. I think most, certainly in the West, can live with that. The issue is there still a business model to be made? And sure, if you can make money off the solar panels. And remember, even if the energy companies didn't want to, if solar panels really were cheaper than fossil fuels, don't you think we'd actually start buying them, even if Exxon didn't want us?
That's a very good point. I mean, we live in a society where anytime any sort of technology, any new technology comes along, we're happy to transition to it. But yet when we talk about things that actually affect our lives and actually affect our health, for some reason those transitions become near impossible. And I just don't understand why we as a society cannot figure out a way to have a more forward-thinking point of view when it comes to our own health and our own energy crises that we're facing. And I think that's one of the things that you do a great job of illustrating in this movie. There's a guy in this film, and I think his name is Steve Schneider. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Not a fan of yours?
No.
Now, it's interesting because there's an interesting somewhat of a parallel here in that Steve did his own documentary back in the 70s and then even admittedly ended up being wrong about some of the things that he said. You have now done Cool It, which I think is less, it's probably less damning in the sense that you're not necessarily saying as many definitive facts, but is there anything that you're concerned about that maybe 10 or 20 years from now you might look back on and say, wow, I had that all wrong? Or do you think that at this point we pretty much know these are the solutions, this is what we need to do?
Well, listen, it's hard to talk about what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years, but I think we very, very clearly know the current approach is not working. And to say, well, let's just try one more year, a couple of years more, maybe 10 years, and then we'll figure out whether we were right or wrong, it's just simply a wrong way to approach it. We've been failing for the last 18 years, let's try a new strategy. We've asked some of the world's top climate economists, what are the smartest solutions, and those are the ones that we're presenting. Now, they may all be wrong, but chances are that they're probably not. And because it's orders of magnitude in difference, I think we're probably fairly safe in saying these are some of the best things that we could be doing. And also, remember, the real and fundamental reason why, for instance, you talk about why can't we transition, we're happy to do this with computers. Remember, you didn't buy, now you're probably not around in the 1950s, but nobody bought computers in the 1950s because they were like big as a basement and they couldn't do anything. And back then, it would have been silly to try to say, let's speed up the development of computers by promising everyone to get a computer in 1960. That would have been horrendously expensive and would not have done very much. Likewise, we shouldn't have been taxing other technologies. You wouldn't actually have helped the computers by taxing typewriters. The right solution was, which was the one we chose, is to invest dramatically in research and development, basically through the space race and through the military. Buy a few of them, but mainly just make integrated circuits much, much smaller. And eventually, of course, IBM and Apple came along and made computers that we all wanted to buy. And now we all own one. But we didn't do so because we taxed typewriters or because we promised everybody one. We did it because we focused on getting the technology going. And that's the exact same thing that's going to solve this one. We don't transition right now because solar panels are incredibly expensive. Once they're cheap, we'll all do it.
There's something else that you do that's interesting in the film, and that is going around and talking to children of different countries. And I think that really is one of the more important aspects of this film is educating the youth of today, because it's amazing how, for lack of a better word, ignorant some people are to what exactly is going on to our planet. And so by educating the youth of today, I think it really does help. And I want to strongly encourage, if there's any teachers that are watching, please make sure that your kids see this film, because I think that it's a great educational film. It's an eye-opening film. I got to say, man, you're saying some really interesting things, and I enjoyed listening to your perspective on a lot of this. The man is Bjorn Lomborg, and the film is Cool It. Be sure and see it and learn something. Thank you very much, Bjorn. I really appreciate you talking to us. Thanks so much.